The day was just grand o'er the rolling farmland in the province of Alberta South. A day like most others, we were there with our mothers, till somebody opened their mouth. Now we'd all heard the tale of the place in the dale, and the cliff from which they did jump. The kids leapt without fright, and kept their arms in tight, till into the river they kerplunked. Over there we should head, one of the boys said, their youthful excitement did show. They went for their suits, swapping sandals for boots. Then one of them looked at Aunt Jo. "Come with us, Aunt Joanne, you're young, rested, and tan," said Alan, or Casey, or Ty. "Why not?" Aunt Jo thought. "I'll give it a shot. The worst that could happen's I'll die." Now right here I'll confess, I wasn't there for this mess, though to the river and cliff I have been, and I've seen the kids fly from the cliff straight and high, and I really did not envy them. But at least I digress. Let's get on with the rest of the story of Joanne's fateful drop. To the truck they did go, the youth and more mature Jo, and at this point she should have yelled, "Stop!" Just a rugged trip over through alfalfa and clover is enough to make anyone scared, but 'twas too late to turn back as they passed the haystack, and besides, they all had been dared. The road dipped and rolled, and if Jo's feet had grown cold, they were warmed by the high summer sun. And when they got to the place, the kids they did race to see who was the first to have fun. Now the river runs fast, and when it goes past, you can see that it's shallow and cold. 'Cept where it goes round the turn, it boils and it churns, and has eaten a very deep hole. The kids crossed the water, some like ducks, some like otters, and headed for the top of the cliff. And when they got there, they jumped into the air. No hesitation, no buts, ands, or ifs. Joanne stayed on the calm side, recovering from the ride, and watched them with wonder and awe, as with youthful disdain the kids fell like rain in the stream from the cliff without pause. "Come on, Aunt Joanne," they began to demand. "It's fun, and it's not all that high. Bring the others there with you, and come jump as we do." In unison the kids they did cry. So Jo crossed the creek with a few other meek that had stayed contemplating the deed. As they started up the trail, their faces grew pale. Some encouragement was all they would need. They finally reached the top, where they had to stop and prepare for the rapid free fall. And when they looked down, the cliff, it had grown, and it looked like a 100-foot wall. Jo didn't think that she could, didn't know if she would, be able to step out and make the drop. And lucky for Aunt Jo, the girl in front would not go, so she had to wait as all jumping stopped. "Come on," they all said, "there's nothing to dread." "We've all done it," they continued to talk. After about half an hour, the girl found the power and silently stepped off the rock. She fell straight and true and into the blue of the river that rolled on below, and came up with a smile you could see for a mile. Then everyone looked at Aunt Jo. "Don't take time to think, just act on instinct," Jo thought, stepping out on the ledge. "Heaven, please help me." Deep breath, count 1, 2, 3. And Joanne stepped over the edge. It was peaceful out there, falling through the air, for at least 100 miles, so it seemed. As her whole life flashed past, she let out a gasp, and she finally entered the stream. Now later on about eve, with a cool gentle breeze, we all sat about on the stoop, talking of the day, the food, fun, and play. I turned to Joanne for the scoop. Now it's my understanding you jumped from the landing, overlooking the river, I remarked. As Joanne looked at me, in her eyes I could see something deep in her brain I had sparked. I'll tell you, my friend, she slowly began. Her voice, it could barely be heard. I went down with the guys and watched the kids fly, and thought to myself, how absurd. For reasons I don't understand, I bowed to the kids' demands, and found myself moving off up the trail. Suddenly I was young, carefree and full of fun, and thought to myself, this is just swell. But when I finally arrived, when it was time to dive, and I cautiously peered over the side, my muscles they froze from my head to my toes, and I suddenly would rather have died. Now lucky, or not for me, there was a girl there, you see, who just before me arrived at the ledge, and she had the same plight, being struck smart with fright, while the kids tried to coax her over the edge. After half an hour of talk, they got the girl to walk to the edge, and she fell out of view. Like a zombie I followed, took a deep breath and swallowed, and off of the cliff went me too. I fell several stories as my life flashed before me. My stomach was tied up in knots. This all before I was wet. The water I hadn't even hit yet, but I figured the farm I had bought. It seemed like forever, though I'd been better if never, till into the water I went. I kept my arms down, feet pointed at the ground, and in the river's surface I made a small dent. Water's supposed to be soothing, not a thing to cause bruising, but here, take a look at my legs. I could see patches of blue and black, spreading from the front to the back, from where she'd gone into the dregs. But that's not the worst caused by that which quenches thirst. All eyes on the deck were on Joe. I hit the stream with such force, 'twas as kicked by a horse, though that would have been a much more welcome blow. As I slipped in, the water tried to remove my skin, and it felt like it almost succeeded. When the force hit my chest, it tried to remove my left breast, as if that is just what I needed. Authors aside, right here I'd like to express concerning the female breast, there are one or two I've admired, and I like where they're placed, and they're evenly spaced. To see them rearranged I have no desire. The pain was severe from the front to the rear, but now my lungs they screamed out for air. I swam towards the light, hoping I'd be all right, and said to myself a little prayer. But I came out alive, I actually survived, though it will take some time to recoup. And when I've recovered, it's back to being a mother. There, you asked, so I gave you the scoop. And I'm glad that I went. Experience cannot be lent, and I have quite a story to tell. The next time the kids go, and they say, "Come on, Aunt Joe," I'll quietly reply, "Go to hell."